Welcome into another episode of the Main Streets Podcast. I'm William Galloway. Always a privilege to be joined by the Alabama legend, Britton Johnson. BJ, another episode of the MSP Alabama going into the IBOB this weekend. And you can't help but smile when you think about Crimson Tide basketball these days.
Yeah, they're calling this episode the IBOB preview IBOB special. And it's the most anticipated regular season basketball game I think for either of these teams ever. So a lot to look forward to. And like you said, I think the team's finally starting to live up to that preseason hype in this last few weeks once we got in the shot going a little bit. And it's been a lot of fun to watch.
And you've said that all season long. I mean, we've done, 4 or 5 episodes, and you've kind of talked about you hit your stride, you kind of find your identity, see what you're made of, get punched in the mouth a couple times. Alabama's 21-3, 10-1 in conference play, but at this point, you've had a tough home loss at Ole Miss, excuse me, versus Ole Miss in Coleman Coliseum. You've got a back nine stretch that is the most challenging schedule maybe in the history of college basketball. And you get Auburn twice, you welcome Florida, you got Kentucky, Mississippi State. But I mean, this game this weekend, college game day, one versus two, really one versus one, is a game that neither team has seen of this magnitude, Alabama and Auburn, in its history in a regular season game. I think it's easy to say, and not really that outlandish to say, this is the biggest regular season games for both teams in their program history.
Yeah, I mean 100% because it's not just where each team is ranked, where each team is ascended to, or where each program even is ascended to, but it's the fact that it's the in-state rival. And so what already is normally the game circled on a calendar, if you will, is now like you said, it's not even just 1v2, it's 1v1 because it's the split poll. Not that rankings don't really matter. I love what Coach Oates had to say about that after the Arkansas game, but I think it's just set up to be a classic, and it's kind of what after a few games into the year when both teams really started to look at it, like they were going to round into a really good form. Uh, it's what every Alabama or Auburn fan was dreaming this matchup could possibly be, and so super exciting. The build up, as we were talking before we started recording, that this kind of feels like a football game build up or like a big postseason game build up. Uh, you know, and so it's been a lot of fun. Like it kind of feels like an LSU football game that we're going into, and it's
Game of
almost
the
like we
century
needed
type environment.
right, and we should have had a full week of build up. It's like so we almost did a disservice to these teams by making them play midweeks, but both look great in those games, and so there's no trap game that either team fell into. So it's really just set up as well as possible.
I think Vandy had a little bit of a push there against Auburn, and then Texas, kind of held Alabama to a slow start, and then obviously both teams put their thumb down and put their foot down and were able to make a lot of plays. And Alabama won by 23 on the road, Auburn won by 12 in Nashville, and so I think that was kind of like you said, a polishing moment for both teams. And you look ahead, those were Tuesday night games, and now you got 3 full days to get ready. They drive across the state, and bam, there you go. Britton, in terms of the magnitude, you played in some big games. You played in the NCAA tournament, albeit COVID. But as a player, right, coaches will tell you all the time, well, if there's one big game, then that means the other games aren't important. How do you navigate a locker room environment, feeling and hearing the external pressure, and then navigating practicing like you practice, but also limiting playing with emotion, right? What are those guys going through? What are they experiencing right now?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who first said this, but I think it's good. It's good to play with emotion, so long as you don't go over the edge and be emotional in the way you play. And so there's an extent to which, and I'm as process oriented of a person as you'll find in terms of approaching every game the same way, using the same process going in every game. But there is an extent to which, especially when it's the in-state rival, it's a team that these guys have either grown up hating if they were fans of their respective teams going into it, or that they've kind of grown to hate. I mean, like I remember
Or
JQ
played for if
even
you're Aiden Holloway.
or played for, which will add this whole different element to it. But I think even JQ, who's a guy who's from New Jersey, who played at Villanova for a year, comes to Alabama and he immediately gets the rivalry. Like all you have to do is go play at the rival school one time, and you understand the rivalry in it, and it changes the way you probably approach the game, even if not in like scouting way or anything else, but just it's a highly emotional game, and it's going to be a lot of fun because you're going to get to see all these guys at their best, but also being pushed in a way they probably haven't been all year. And so it's gonna be a ton of fun. I'm so excited for it.
All right, as you drape that March Madness blanket over your shoulders, I want to one encourage you that you can turn the heat up, and two, I want to ask you, and we don't have to out anybody. We don't want to, throw stuff on AL.com headlines, but let's go back to your playing days, playing in the IBOB. It wasn't what it is going to be this weekend and later in a couple weeks down in Auburn. But do you have any stories of guys you talked about, JQ growing up in New Jersey, Herb Jones, obviously an in-state guy, Petty and Reese and all those guys. I mean, did they do anything or say anything at any point? And you don't have to use names when it came to these games in terms of hatred for the other program.
One speech I'll never forget for the rest of my life, and it's ironic. This was my freshman year. We weren't that great. I think we lost this game. Actually, it might have been my sophomore year, so we played well, but we lost. But was Coach Pett. So Pett Way giving just an unbelievably impassioned speech the night before he played at Auburn. Pett Way being an Alabama kid, born and raised, going to Alabama. He has lived the rivalry his whole life. I'm not going to get into the details of what all was said, but I will never forget that for the rest of my life because it just meant so much to him, and you could tell, and everyone was just bought in on going and playing playing the best they could, and that game in particular didn't go our way, but I think that it speaks to just how much it goes into this game. That way cared about every game, and he was the guy. I don't know if y'all remember, but in the preseason or the pregame huddles, he would be the one like hyping up the guys. But this was a night before, bringing everyone in, team meeting type speech.
A
That was
cameras
just
off
awesome.
speech, if you will.
Oh, cameras off. Yeah, not you're not allowed to hear that one. And so, but he is someone that just means so much to him. And you named a couple of the guys that it just meant a lot to, and it means a lot to everyone because at the end of the day, especially with the programs being where they are now, you're going to be judged by a couple of things. Were you able to win any championships while you were there? And maybe an individual success element. And then how'd you do against the rival school? And it's
Creighton.
not that
How'd you do
it's not,
against Creighton?
yeah, well, yeah, our number one rival, Creighton. I don't think we played them when I was there, but we did beat Wichita State, which is obviously up on the list of rivals. But there is an element to which, because of the build-up, it's become a Duke Carolina in a sense of just people will remember a few things from that season. They'll remember generally how you finished. They'll remember how you performed relative to your conference and maybe in the postseason, and they'll probably remember how you did against your in-state rival. And so, it's great that it's at that point. It's really fun that both programs are there. I mean, I think a decade ago it'd be inconceivable that either program was where it is now, and so it's just been so impressive and so fun to see. I'd say, and we've talked about this a ton because of our focus on Sanford and other programs around the state, but the level of basketball in the state of Alabama has just risen in a way that I could have never guessed or expected. Um, Certainly being born and raised here, growing up here, such a football state, um, that it just you never thought, man, this state's really going to become a great basketball state. But it's kind of what we've become, and I love the way that both fan bases have really bought into it over these last few years.
Let's look at the matchup because you can pull up all the stats. I've got on my second monitor here, you got the SEC stats, and you talk about turnover margin and points per game and forced turnovers, 3-point field goals. But both teams are at the top of what they do in the country, right? One versus one, as we mentioned earlier. So the stats don't really tell the story, but when you look at this game and the matchup and the players, and you got special talent and a guy like Janai Broom who can do a lot of different things. You've got Alabama, who's probably the deepest team in the country and has had different guys step up night after night. And have, as you mentioned, have played in this rivalry game. Maybe we predict a Grant Nelson legacy game here like we had last year in the NCAA tournament. But you got Alabama who can hit you every which way. What stands out to you matchup wise of how these two teams play and what we might see X's and O's wise come Saturday afternoon?
I think a few things are going to stand out early. I think both teams are going to be playing unbelievably hard because that's kind of the makeup of their programs. But I think one thing you'll see early is the way the game is called is going to dictate a lot about the game. And this isn't a refs decide games type of thing necessarily, but if it's called really tight, um, I think that probably favors Alabama a little bit more because of their pace, because of the way we play and attack the realm. Um, and vice versa. If they're allowed to be really physical, I think Auburn is a lot like Ole Miss defensively in terms of how physical they are, how long they are, how athletic they are, and so that could present a lot of issues for Alabama. Obviously, I don't think Alabama brought their A game that day, but I think that's one thing that stands out to me. And the other is in terms of just matchup. I think this is not going to be a game that is decided necessarily by Janai versus Mark Sears or CBM versus Grant Nelson in terms of the stars. I think it's going to be the others that make the difference. And so it's going to be which third, fourth, fifth, sixth guy steps up and plays at a really, really high level. And I think that's going to be the difference because I think the top end guys are about at that same level. They're all super experienced. They've been here before. I expect all of them to rise to the occasion. It's going to be which guys that aren't the marquee guys are going to have a great game. So for Alabama, recently it's been Aiden Holloway, which how perfect would that be for us if Aiden had a great game? But you go, LeBaron and CY and some of these guys who have been playing awesome for us recently. I mean, Jaron played unbelievable at Texas. If that continues, or Mo D, I mean, like any of these guys, and that's the beauty of Alabama is there's so much depth. I think Auburn is still a very deep team and a very experienced team, but they're going to have one of their guys step up in a big way. And I think it's going to be a big shot making game, which sounds super obvious, but what you notice when you have these top level teams is there will be good defense played on most every possession. Is going to be who can make tough shots. And I think we saw it a lot for Alabama when they played Kentucky. We saw it a lot for Alabama when they played Mississippi State. You had guys step up and make tough shots, and so you're going to need to do that. And so if the Josh paper popper, if we look at this at the end of the day and it's a 2 for 21 3-point effort from Alabama, it's not pretty. Same for Auburn. And so guys have to step up, make plays. And for Alabama, I think a big key is keeping turnovers down. And I'd say there are two team keys: it'd be keeping turnovers down and pushing the pace and making it an Alabama style game and not an Auburn style game.
Yeah, you talk about those guys and those playmakers and big plays. I think back to the Georgia game when Aiden Sherrill hit 2 threes, right? Hadn't been his bread and butter, but he's a fantastic contributor for Alabama, and he's certainly a capable shot maker. And so stuff like that's going to go a long way in that game. Britton, you talk about limiting turnovers, and I want to ask you because we've seen it early on from Alabama. We don't want to call it sloppy play, and not kissing up either. But in terms of like you play fast, you turn the ball over at a higher rate. That's just that comes with the way that you're going to play the style of the game. So when that's happening, right, and the other team gets a run, you get maybe 2 turnovers on 5 possessions. You're not finding a rhythm. Coach calls timeout. What's going on in those huddle? Because to the non-ball knowing fans, you sit there and you throw your hands up and you go, "What are we doing? Stop turning the ball over. Like get in a set, slow it down, whatever." And that is evidence of someone who does not know the game of basketball. But take us inside those huddles when those moments happen, because we know Saturday with the talent of these two teams, there's going to be runs, there's going to be streaks of turnovers, and you're going to see those timeouts called. So kind of bring us into what the conversation is. Obviously the situation might vary what the conversation would be, but in your experience, share some of that with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those huddles don't go how most people would think that they do. Not all of them are coach lighting into guys or, coach coming up with some, he's not reinventing the wheel in the huddle. A lot of the time it is very much, hey, settle down. We are fine. Here's what we're not doing well. And, a lot of times for us, if we're not turning it over or we're not getting good points per possession, we're not getting enough paint touches. And so we're kind of putting ourselves in bad positions, making it where we have to do these skip passes and harder passes, and we're putting ourselves in a position to turn the ball over. So it's getting paint touches early in a possession, because once you do that, if you can get a paint touch, you're at the advantage now. But if you can never penetrate to the paint, the defense will be basically an advantage the whole time, and that's what leads to a lot of turnovers: is out of control drives late in a possession, or a pass where you really have nowhere to go with the ball. And so it's about getting an early paint touch and attacking the rim. And I think that's something that Alabama's been really, really good at this year. Is I think their rim two percentage has been phenomenal, and their ability to attack the rim. And I even think Oates has allowed more of floaters and some of these. I wouldn't quite call them mid range, but like borderline at the rim mid range shots, especially from certain
Turnarounds,
guys like
floaters, yeah,
right,
paint
especially from the
extended.
guards. I feel like they've just allowed a lot of it, but we've been really efficient and effective at it. And so for Alabama, it's just about getting to that place around the rim, because from there you're going to have a lot of opportunities to have kick out threes, but also at the rim shots, and that's all we want to do. Also, when you drive and get paint touches, that's how you pick up fouls for the other team. So that's the real key. Most of the time, that's kind of what's being said, outside of just basically being like, guys, we got to take care of the ball. And it's not really, coaching per se. It's not like a coaching point of something that you can do different. But for these guys who handle the ball as well as they do, who practice as much as they practice, it's not a skill issue. It is an attention to detail issue. And so that's why a lot of times, you're not going to come out with just a crazy set out of that timeout. It's going to be something simple that gets an attack towards the rim.
That's very insightful and very helpful. Hey, any closing thoughts here? Things you want to share? Wild prediction? Don't do wild predictions. You'll end up like people on other podcasts who go viral and have 16 followers and 12 listens. So, any closing? Do you want to opine on the iBob anymore before we wrap things up? I'll ask it that way.
I think coming into this year, I said, both programs look like they're going to be really good this year. I didn't expect Auburn to be as good as they've been, truthfully. They've impressed me by it. I said, I think this is just one of these years where it's going to be a split. And that's still kind of my feeling on it. I think it's going to be really hard for either team to win on the road. Ironically, they play better basketball on the road, but Auburn's just so good at home. It's a tough to win there. But I really do think Alabama's going to come out and just play really well. We kind of found our groove shooting the basketball. I think this is a game that we're going to play really well and win. I think it's going to be a tight game. But, my overall kind of conclusion is, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, how awesome this is for the state of Alabama. The eyes of college basketball are turning to Tuscaloosa, Alabama on Saturday. And it's got the two best teams in college basketball right now playing. And so, what a gift this is for each fan base. And I know, obviously I want Alabama to win and I want Auburn to lose as much as anybody. But the fact that we're here as a program, and we've been here for a few years, but just have
Yep.
really reached the point of arriving, is so
Of the
cool.
fact
And
that a football state has turned to this,
yeah,
um, this iBob trophy ought to be presented next year at Jordan Hare at halftime of the football game.
yeah,
That
no, I
just would
mean,
make the most sense.
it's special, and it's something that I hope Alabama fans and Auburn fans alike don't take for granted, because the real ones remember where we were 10 years ago and how far these programs have come. And so, there were some iBobs early in the 2010s that were, if a team got to 50, they were probably winning the ball game. And so we've come a long way from there. So, uh, just really, really proud of, I'm proud of Alabama and as the program they've become, but I'm proud of the state of Alabama and the way we've invested into basketball. And we're really getting to reap the rewards right now. So, super excited for it. Other thing is, y'all be praying for me. I'm going to be in Auburn. Somehow got roped into an Auburn wedding the weekend of the iBob. I will have to watch the game on my phone. That's all I can say on it. I do not want to Harvey Updike the trees, but if we lose, it might get ugly. So, uh, anyways, I kid. William's looking at me in disgust. I kid,
Yeah, we know you're not
um,
serious on that.
but I think it is just very ironic twist of events that
You
I'm
just
not
just
going to
go
be in
go
Auburn this
buy go buy a
weekend.
tumor. If we lose, go buy a tumor's lemonade. Just pour it out on the corner.
Yeah,
Just
No
Boston
kidding.
Tea Party the lemonade, and that can be our sacrifice.
I think I'll stay away from Toomer's Corner if we lose that one. I have a
Yeah.
feeling that will be a real active spot. So, but we're not speaking negativity; we're speaking
No.
positivity, and I do believe that the side's going to come through and win this ball game. And I'm just going to enjoy every second of watching it. So, um,
You talk about the difference in the last 10 years, and I'll say this and then we'll give you the last word. But Alabama, Nate Oates has saved Alabama fans a lot of money on hotels and travel because Alabama fans now expect to go up to the SEC tournament in Nashville, and hopefully it stays in Nashville for a long time. But on Friday, right? There's no longer fighting for, who are you going to match up with as the 8, 9, 10 seed. There's a double bye expected each year in the SEC tournament. I think that's significant. And another small thing of a mark of success that you don't want to take for granted. So I think you bring up a lot of good points there. But BJ, I will leave you and your March Madness blanket cape with the last word. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. We hope everybody checks us out, whether you listen on Apple or Spotify or you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate everybody checking out the Mean Streets podcast and hearing what two washed up reporter and former college basketball players have to say. So, BJ, take it away for the last word here on the Mean Streets podcast.
yeah, I think I've said a lot, but just how special this is. Alabama fans enjoy this. I believe we're going to hopefully get a great win here, and just it'll be something to remember. So this will be a really important Saturday for our program, for our state. So just enjoy every second of it. Roll Tide.